The public sector is often seen as more reactive and responsive rather than proactive when it comes to culture and employees. Hi, I'm Maike Imberg, workplace culture and inclusion consultant, and on this channel we talk real about culture, about work, about leadership. And today we're going to look at 3 Glassdoor reviews from within the public sector. One big stigma within the public sector is that inclusion and diversity is very kind of cost-led, austerity-led. That's the mindset that we're applying. And what that means is basically there is no real investment into people, into making sure that people can perform at the best of their ability. It might also mean that there are no real staff network groups, employee resource groups. A second big stigma is around a lack of support for professional development, but also just to do your job. So there are a couple of reports that do suggest that employees from within the public sector say, actually, there isn't a lot of support from my organization for me to just do my job. All these reviews that we're going to look at today are also looking at another stigma in the public sector, and that is that it's quite a rigid hierarchy and quite outdated management practices. And again, yes, we do see that reflected in reports and in statistics that generally the public sector is less interested in really diving into modern, inclusive, good leadership practices and behaviors. So let's have a look at these reviews then and see what rings true. Now, the first review here is a 2-star review, and the headline is "Not the best place." The pro is not really a pro because it says really no benefits of working here. The cons are low salary, workplace harassment, high stress. Low salary, so not a competitive salary, potentially no opportunities to progress. Workplace harassment, now that is definitely something that is reflected in some reports about the experiences of employees in the public sector in the UK, that people get away with the behavior. Did you know, from a psychological perspective, the worst type of leadership is actually the very laissez-faire leadership that shies away from dealing with bad behaviors in the first place, because that's setting a precedent, right? That is somebody with negative behaviors, exclusive behaviors, harassing behaviors, getting away with it. Again, high stress, very likely related to both of the other points, right? If I'm experiencing negative behavior from other people around me, of course, that impacts my mental health. And if I then feel like I'm not valued enough in financial terms, so my salary is too low, again, that's going to have an impact on me and my expectations to the workplace. Now, the second review, which was in the summer this year, is also a 2-star review. So the headline is "Good for short time, but not a long-term job." Here, some of the pros that were picked up are flexible working. That was a common theme when I had a look through all of these Glassdoor reviews, actually, the flexible working and the good work-life balance. We do see that in the public sector more so than in the private sector as a benefit, that once you're out of work, you're out of work. Where in the private sector, what we often see is that visibility, you doing extra hours, overtime, that's actually being rewarded. And no, we don't have that as much in the public sector. So that's a positive. However, the cons are no progression, there you go, poorly run as an organization, culture, bad management. The stigmas of the public sector are reflected in this review. Bad management, probably outdated, probably letting other people get away with those negative behaviors, potential workplace harassment as well. And no progression. So again, not giving employees the resources and the tools they need, firstly, to just thrive in their job, to do their job, but secondly, to actually progress and to think about what is the development that I would like for myself. And it goes back to what I said at the beginning, right? That it's quite cost-led and this austerity-first mindset, because unless we really have the money, we're probably not going to invest it into the development in our employees, let alone something around inclusion and diversity. So that's where we do see, in fact, that the public sector is a little bit behind. Also, again, poorly run as an organization. There is a misunderstanding that inclusion goes back to performance, right? We want everybody to perform at their best, whatever that means for them. A big part of that is that we want everybody to feel like they really truly belong. But that seems to be something that is still lacking in the public sector. If we now look at our last review, it's a 1-star review from just a couple of weeks ago, and it says misaligned priorities and dysfunctional leadership. The only pros here is the work-life balance and hybrid working and flexi time. So that is something that the public sector is good at. The cons list is sadly, but also unsurprisingly, longer. So it's poor collaboration, management dysfunction. I wouldn't recommend this role to anyone seeking a stable, impactful position in financial management. The advice to management: seriously, will you ever learn? Now, this review definitely reflects all of the stigmas that we have been talking about at the beginning of this episode, right? Work-life balance is very important to people, and we do find that reflected in the public sector. However, poor collaboration, management dysfunction, for somebody to use the word dysfunction, that says a lot. It basically alludes to the leadership team not being on the same page amongst themselves. Now, whether that's regarding vision, mission, what are we here to do, and how are we going to achieve that? What are my team objectives? Or whether it's around behaviors as well. Ignoring negative behaviors in the workplace, that is absolutely the worst experience for employees. Because guess what? Then people just keep their head down. They're not going to speak up. Even worse, they think, why should I have your back as my organization? Because you don't have my back. Because you let other people harass other people. You let people discriminate other people. You let other people get away with negative behaviors, especially if you're then not investing in my development and in my progression. I really don't have any reason to do anything else other than the bare minimum to get my paycheck. Your people could perform much better. They could be much happier. They could really feel like they belong and like it's the right place for them. And then they're also going to stay longer. Overall, I think there's a lot of opportunity in the public sector to really shift the narrative, to really shift the culture. One of the main things and one of the first steps would and should be focusing to modernize leadership behaviors and approaches to leadership. If you're an engineer and you're very technical, and then all of a sudden you're being asked to lead a team, to manage a team of 6 or more people, that's a big responsibility. That's a huge shift in what your day-to-day will actually look like. And there's not enough training for people like that to make sure that they feel confident and comfortable to be a manager day in, day out. We definitely need to focus on some more modern training and resources to really equip leaders in the public sector. But it's of course bigger than that. The public sector needs to become a bit more brave and a bit more bold in decision making. We do see that in the private sector reflected much more. Innovation. Do we really associate the word innovation with the public sector? Probably not, right? And that's exactly the shift we need. We need to associate innovation also with the public sector. But currently, the public sector is lacking that a little bit. And from my experiences, we really need to shift that focus. The current challenges that we're facing, they're not going to go away. There will only be more challenges. We're going to have a whole generation that's going to retire. And there's very different expectations and very different skills and experiences in every generation. And that could be a real strength of the public sector to utilize all of these experiences and skills amongst the different generations. But in order to do so, we need to start listening to our employees. We need to start listening to everyday experiences of our employees. And we need to start not letting people get away with negative behavior. For that, we need to set clear expectations, have clarity on the vision, have clarity on the inclusive behaviors we like to see more of in the workplace. And that needs to start with the leadership. Thank you very much for joining me today on episode 3. Subscribe, support, join the conversation, and join us next week for episode 4.